So I think that Saloonatics is one of the best Eddsworld episodes, or at least one of the best in the Legacy era, and I think that maybe its best part is the animation. The episode was animated by a small team of artists called Studio Cacti, and no other episode looks like this. In fact, there are very few cartoons that I've ever seen that look like this. With the character designs, I can see a fair amount of anime influence, but I could also see these characters alongside some Western cartoons from the 2000s, and of course, it still looks at home among other animations from the 2010s. The colour palette as well, very warm, a little muted. Compared to the vibrancy of many episodes around this time, just the colour of this episode gives it a completely different vibe. I especially love the sunburnt orange and brown look in all the backgrounds. Seeing as the episode takes place largely in deserts and wooden buildings and in a museum, they just radiate this warmth that I absolutely adore. Then with this bright blue of the sky in some of the shots, you can almost feel the heat of the desert on your skin. With all that said, you'd be hard pressed not to find a more controversial looking episode. Obviously, controversy is a strong word in this instance, but you probably either absolutely adore this animation or you absolutely hate it. I think that a lot of people have grown to love it, but when this episode came out 5 years ago, I remember seeing a huge amount of fans that were quite upset by this style. Naturally, Saloonatics is a big departure for Eddsworld, visually speaking, and there is good reason for that. This episode came out during the Legacy era, where Tom had control of the show for a time after a successful crowdfunding campaign. And if you weren't around in the fandom before 2020, you cannot begin to understand the sheer extent of the backlash that came with Tom taking control in 2012. Some of the complaints were arguably justifiable. The whole thing was financed through crowdfunding, and there were issues with the perks, they missed deadlines, and they went way over budget. Also, some people just didn't like the show's new feel as much as the old one, which is understandable. But the volume of pure hate and stupidity leveled at Tom and his team before, during, and after the Legacy project is frankly embarrassing. And a lot of the hate just stemmed from things being different. Critics didn't want this new style of humour or storytelling or music or obviously the new animation. And of course you're allowed to not like a cartoon. Christmas Adventure is my least favourite episode and it's not even particularly close. But the criticism was rarely, this looks bad or this isn't funny. It was usually, this isn't what I'm used to. Welcome to the internet, we don't like change, now get out. Pretty much every episode looks different to classic Eddsworld, but none more different than Saloonatics. I think some people were just put off by the radical changes compared to the relatively conservative approaches to designs that we'd seen up until that point in the Legacy era. But there is one other reason that some people don't seem to like this episode as much, and it's kind of its own beast. The frame rate. Unlike other episodes, the characters in Saloonatics rarely move smoothly. They snap from one pose to the next with almost no visible movement in between. People walked away from this episode thinking that it was laggy or lazy. They were so used to the buttery smooth 25 frames per second that this just looked wrong. But here's the thing, it was entirely intentional. According to Tom and one of the animators, Saloonatics was animated on 3s and 4s at 24 FPS with intentionally keyframe-driven movement.
I literally have no idea what you're saying.
Okay, let's break that down. Also, here's your obligatory I am not an animator disclaimer. Apologies if I get anything wrong here. 24 FPS, frames per second, means that 24 frames, 24 different images, are played in 1 second to simulate motion. This is pretty standard for film, and I made a video about how animation uses these frames to full effect. For our purposes, the 3s and 4s essentially mean that this number was divided by 3 or 4. So even for more action-orientated scenes, there may only be 8 drawings a second to convey motion. That's still a lot, but compared to the 120 frames per second many video game enthusiasts expect nowadays, 8 FPS sounds like a slideshow. But in the world of animation, that number is far from unprecedented. For decades, Japan has opted for a similar low FPS approach. typically favouring more detailed characters drawn fewer times. There's a few reasons for doing this, but one of the main reasons is economical. Sometimes you just don't need that many images to convey a single idea, and if you need to save money, then unnecessary frames are usually the first to go. Now, remember how I said that episodes were often late and over budget in the Legacy era? Yeah, at that point you could probably get away with losing fluidity and lip movement. And again, look at Japan, notorious for low budget productions that cut corners in this way, choosing to go with beautiful, stylistic artwork displayed at a lower frame rate whenever necessary. And because it's so universally adopted, this is just what a lot of Westerners imagine as the look of anime. This natural snappiness interspersed by held frames and repeated motions in an effort to save time and money gives anime a look that you just don't see in the West, at least not unless they're trying to pay homage to this anime style. There's a certain beauty and to some extent novelty in the way that everything just looks and moves. And I think this is the look that the animators were going for, either paying homage to anime directly or simply adopting the style for a unique look whilst also sticking to an internet animation budget. And so yeah, Saloonatics is well animated actually. Between a strong art direction, clever use of colours and lighting, some impressive camera angles, and a solid understanding of motion, a case could be made for Saloonatics being the best looking episode ever made.